Good afternoon or good late morning to everyone. I am Tim Serantonio. I'm excited for today's presentation, how to get your organization and your data ready for data migration. I'm going to be kind of playing a little background role here. We're going to get into our presenter momentarily, but few basics before we dive in on the next slide as we have people pop in. Just want to go over our agenda for today. We had a pretty good turnout, so gonna kind of stall here a tiny bit. First, welcome. I am so grateful for the folks of you that are either viewing this now or in the recording to dedicate time out of your day to just talk about data migration. This is going to be fun, though. We're going to try to make this fun, interactive. I'll be following the questions to kick over to Christina here. So we're going to do some introductions to our guide through today's content today, which is going to dive into the strategies that your organization can take if you are gearing up for a data migration, as well as some tips for ongoing data maintenance. A word of note for the attendees to potentially save you some time. If you are a current Neon CRM client, you're going to get a little bit out of this, but you might not get a lot out of this. This is really designed for people who are looking to transfer into a new CRM. And if you are with us, great. Now, let's say you're unhappy with Neon CRM, you might get some tips on how to leave. That's perfectly fine. If we empower you to be happy, we are happy with that. But we are talking about the ways that we've been handling data transfers since even before I started the company, started at the company, which was in 2011. And we've honed and created what we feel is the industry's most sophisticated approach to data migrations. What we're going to be doing is just really kind of pulling back the curtain and giving you a behind the scenes look on how a company that's helped thousands of organizations do this, do it well. And we want to empower you to do it well. We also want to empower you with the questions to ask as you go through this process that many organizations cite as the most stressful part of onboarding into a new thing. So we have an amazing expert here. We're going to get into who that is in a moment, but we're going to be covering things about where to start in terms of understanding the landscape of your data, the actual transfer process there, and the options that organizations should be considering when it comes to that. Clean up, yes. How do you clean your data? And that actually has a lot of different questions that come with that. And then appends. So again, if you're a current Neon CRM client, that append section is actually going to be pretty cool for you in particular. Whereas if you're not using us, you're going to get a lot out of this in total. And the handout, no matter what, check it, click it. There's a PDF download there of the deck itself. We've created a special further resources section that includes links to Neon One Academy, some articles on data stewardship, and some other fun resources. So without further ado, we're going to dive into today's presentation. On the next slide, just wanted to kind of start with a quote. So this is from the CEO of a company called Ring Central. We don't have a relationship with them or anything like that. I just thought it was a good quote. Don't worry, we're going to get into housekeeping items such as recordings, by the way. So that's a yes in terms of this is being recorded and you will gain access to this as well as the slides. Housekeeping coming very shortly, but we think to help. Okay, Strina, come on. Let's go back to the quote. I didn't even get to read the quote. So
Sorry, Tim.
that's okay. So without a systemic way to start and keep data clean, bad data will happen. And this is an important stat for the simple reason that there's been some intensive research on this. And for every bad record in your database, it is costing your organization $100. So that's one record. And the reason that happens is that, let's take some practical ways that comes about. Incorrect name. Something like incorrect name. or it could be all capitalized. So you're like yelling at someone when you're sending out an email, or you're sending out an appeal, or you're calling somebody by the wrong name, or somebody got divorced and you are addressing it to a person who no longer is with, or identifying as a person with the entity that you are referring them to, or bad addresses. We're going to get into some concrete data around that later on. But you know, if you get stacks of letters and appeals returned to you, that's costing you money. So this is why we think this is a good way to frame why migrations are something that we need to pay a lot of attention to, because it can mean not only the success of your implementation, but also the long-term ability for you to steward your donors. Now, without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our guide for today's presentation. Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello. Thank you, Tim. Sorry, I was just so excited to have myself on screen here. I jumped the gun a little bit. I'm Christina Jaxtis. I'm the manager of the professional services team here at Neon CRM. So we handle new system implementation and ongoing training that includes a lot of data migrations. We've seen data from all different databases. As messy as you might think your data is, we've probably seen worse data. So we've really seen it all, and we're really the translator between you, the client, your end needs, and the technical database and data nerd aspect of things. So a lot of data experience. I've done a lot of database administration in my former life as a nonprofit fundraiser and membership manager. So really some boots on the ground experience that led me to today, where I'm focusing on training and working with our team of trainers.
Well, we're really excited, and thank you, Christina, for taking time out of your day for this, as well as for folks who are joining us. So I am getting some questions already, and in terms of the housekeeping, you know, look, folks, we're in a pandemic. Internet might act up. That's what's happening with Audrey over here. Things are being recorded. We're going to make sure that you have this resource for you no matter what. We are going to be taking questions. Yes, we'll have kind of dedicated time at the end, but we'd love this to be as conversational and as organic as possible. Think of this as you know, we're giving a little bit of a coffee talk, but you know, raise your hand, ask us a question. Christina is here at your service. We are here at your service to help kind of demystify the data migration process. Notice, there are not a lot of webinars on this topic. And the reason is that every database company hates data migrations. It costs them a lot of money. But if you're going to make clients happy, you're going to invest the resources into doing it. That's why we're demystifying that for you today in this special webinar. And we want to cite real world examples of success. This is not going to be things that are an abstract. Christina does this. This is her job. And she works with people. She understands their struggles. She understands their fears. And that's what we want to address. And we want to give you some signs of excitement and hope that this is not something that is something to fear. This is something to actually celebrate and get excited about too, no matter if you're a data guru or not. And then this is just the beginning. Data maintenance does not end the moment that your data is in your database. We're going to give you a lot of great strategies for ongoing data work, and that can be the technology that you're using, or just, you know, regular real world application on your everyday life. So just think of this as you know, a step in a ongoing project to make your data rock. Because if your data rocks, then your donor engagement rocks. And if your donor engagement rocks, your retention goes up. And if your retention goes up, you make more money. And then you make more money, you get higher raises. So ultimately, the purpose of this webinar is to get you a raise. Okay? You heard it here first. Christina, let's dive in. First, a poll. We want to get an idea of where your apprehensions lie, because there's a lot of different things that people get apprehensive about. So I'm going to actually go ahead and launch a poll. What is the current biggest problem? So you have to choose one in terms of your current data management approach. So I'm going to let this open up for a little bit of time. We got about 7%, 13%, 14%, 23%. Okay, it's popping up. It's popping up. Thank you. Thank you. Vote, vote, vote. We want to see what's the number one. Christina, what do you think is going to be number one?
I can't even see the poll options. How do I even see
Oh
the
my
poll
goodness.
options?
Okay, we'll show you. We'll show you. So the
Okay,
poll
please do.
options, and we at 70%, I'm actually going to close it off. That's funny. Um, so
You went away and the poll went away.
that's all right. I'm going to share it right now. So the can you see it now yourself?
I cannot.
Oh, whatever. Okay, but thanks. GoToWebinar. So the options are: my data is incomplete, my data isn't useful, my data is inconsistent, my data is outdated, and my organization doesn't have someone in charge of the data. What do you think came out on top?
Ooh, I was gonna say my organization doesn't have someone in charge of the data because I know that's a common thing, or
Mhm.
my data isn't useful.
Inconsistent,
Uh,
47%. 24% is someone's in charge. Actually, useful's only 6%. It's the lowest one.
oh, that's good to hear. That is
That's good to hear.
encouraging.
And Lisa actually said we have data in all different places and formats. No one person is in
Yeah,
charge. I really need to choose many answers on the poll. And so
yeah.
that's also the data. That's, you know what? Multi-select,
Multi-select. Yes,
multi-select, pipe delimiters, all these different types of things.
yes,
This does have an impact even when you're doing that. So Lisa,
yeah,
yes, actually, we
yeah,
would expect multiple people to have that. So cool. We
yeah.
will we will make it multi-select. I purposely did it single select this time. So Christina, take it away. Take it away. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Sounds good. Thank you, Tim. So what we're gonna start with here are some steps to get you ready for data migration. It's common just to skip right ahead and start thinking about what that looks like with your new database once you've selected a new database. But I want to back up a few steps and give you some practical advice to start thinking critically about your data. No one really wants to talk about data. It's not exciting for some people. Maybe you're intimidated by it. You are intimidated by trying to figure out how to tackle that mess of inconsistent data that you have. But I'm really encouraging you to force yourself or encourage yourself to just think critically about this before you even select a new database, before you embark on that. Now, I'm not a sales rep. I'm not here to sell you on a specific solution. What I do and what my team does is we help you think about your data, and we're here to help you make decisions on what's best for your organization and your data. So moving to a new database isn't going to manufacture good data. You want to have an idea of what you're bringing to the table. So that starts with a data inventory. Now, inventory, maybe it's something more formal. It could be a data map. If you have somebody on staff that really wants to roll up their sleeves, outline what you have, chances are, though, you don't have someone on your team like this. When I say data inventory, this could be taking notes or making a spreadsheet with answers to the questions that I have up on the screen here. I'm not saying this is something really formal or scientific. Just want you to have an idea of what you're working with before you even think of a new database. So first question here that I want you to ask yourself is, what data do you track now? When I think of data, I want to break it down into major categories. So things like memberships, donations, case management, peer-to-peer data, maybe you have health data or program data. Start thinking of all these different pieces of data that you have. Identify the key data points, the key fields that you're tracking, and assign them a level of importance. Now, I know right off the bat, it's easy to think that, oh, we have the data somewhere, it must be really important, but really ask yourself, how important is it, and what is your top priority? I'm going to come back to that, and we're going to think about that a little bit later. As you're mapping out what data you actually have, you're naturally probably going to think about question 2 here: where is your data stored? So identify your existing systems that you have, and maybe this is a formal database, maybe it's your accounting software, your email marketing platform. A lot of the times, I love that Tim put this nonprofit tip up on the screen here, your staff probably has shadow databases. They probably have a spreadsheet somewhere with really important information on it. This might be the spreadsheet they use to send a weekly report to your board members. And if you don't know about it, you might not be including it in your data migration plan. And that's a key piece of what you're tracking. So when
Or
I
the
talk,
or Christina, or the dreaded, my executive director has all our major donor relationships right up
here,
here.
Right here. Yeah, include that in your data inventory.
Hmm.
There are things that aren't formally tracked anywhere, and that's okay, because if they're not formally tracked, you probably want to start formally tracking that in the future in a better way. So that's going to be part of this migration and how you're thinking about your data. Even if it's in an unofficial or inconsistent place, include that in your inventory.
The average organization actually houses just the donor data alone in 3 to 5 different data sources when you get down to it.
Yeah. Yep. Third question here, start thinking about how and where you will store your data in the future. So we're thinking of these 3 to 5 databases, these 3 to 5 places that you have. In the future, maybe it makes sense to combine as many of those as possible. If you have your membership stored in some form generation system, but your event tickets are in a separate ticketing platform, I bet those can be combined. In some cases, though, it might not make sense to combine things. For example, if you have sensitive health data or protected private program data, client data, that might need to stay in a specialized database or not touch your donor database just for privacy reasons. So it could make sense to streamline as much as possible. That's probably what you're trying to do with a new system. But in some cases, it's just not in the best interest of your organization and your data. And I encourage you to think of what data do you really need to bring into a new database. Some data might just be left in spreadsheets. Maybe that shadow database is not the most useful thing and it can stay in a spreadsheet on your internal server. Like, do you want 20-year-old donors that you haven't engaged with since and nobody has talked to in 20 years? Do you really want to migrate those? You have old surveys from 10 years ago, or you have custom fields that a staff member 5 years ago created and nobody knows what they are. Think of if you really need to put time and energy into migrating all of that into your new system. I talked about assigning priorities to your data. That's coming up again here, right? Where are your priorities? My advice is always to cater to the rules, not to the exceptions. So don't eat up your time and resources figuring out how to track that one membership level from 10 years ago that nobody's using anymore. Just let that one go, focus on your priorities moving forward. Last question up here is, how do you need to report on your data in the future? A common reason you might be looking for a new system is you just have some reporting limitations or you don't have good transparency into your data. So start thinking about those things. What do you want to do with your data in the future? Maybe it's not in good enough shape for you to run those types of reports now, but it's probably going to spark new ideas for how you could be tracking it in the future. So now you have your data inventory. You have a good idea of what data you're working with. So you're in talks with your new database or a potential new vendor that you're going to be working with. And at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to get all of your data and physically give it to the new database, physically hand it over, get it into the new system. So this I find is something that can really slow down a new system implementation. It can be easy to assume that, oh yeah, we just need to pull together these couple of spreadsheets. Then you sign your contract, you really get into things and start thinking about your data, and you realize it's taking you weeks to actually get your data together. So go back, think about your priorities, like we talked about, go back to your data inventory. Ask yourself if you actually know how to get this data. Is it a matter of your staff members sending you spreadsheets? If it's in a database, can you export this yourself? Or do you have to find your IT contractor for your custom database and have them do it for you? Maybe you don't even have permission to do this, and maybe they don't want to give you the data. That's a struggle we see all the time. Figure out those pieces so that once you sign your new contract, you can really hit the ground running and your implementation is not stalled because you don't know how to get your data. Once you have the data together, or as you're getting it together, also be thinking of how are you actually going to transfer this to your new database. You need to get it to somebody on the other end. I always encourage file sharing instead of emailing, just for security reasons. Be mindful of what data is actually in your spreadsheets. If you have social security numbers or HIPAA data or that protected client data, you probably don't want to be transmitting that data. You don't want to be sending that back and forth all the time. So be mindful of what's in your data. If you have credit card numbers scribbled around somewhere, you don't want to be including that in a spreadsheet and sending it off to somebody else. So think about what is actually in the data and any privacy concerns with that. Next up here, we have data cleanup. This is kind of a big, vague scenario. I'm going to go through some specific things. You might just be thinking, well, my data is a total mess. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like I said, I guarantee you I've seen messier, but let's break that down a little bit more. Let's figure out what is actually messy. What is the root issue here? And then we can figure out how to actually clean it up once we know what's going on. There are really common scenarios across all organizations, as you saw in the poll earlier, really common scenarios. First up is your data is incomplete. So an example of this could be maybe you have a solid financial history, you have good transaction history because your bookkeeper is awesome, you have a great accounting system that's tracking all of that, but it's an accounting system. You don't have all of the relational information, like maybe you're not tracking households or family connections. Those relationship pieces that you as a fundraiser are really leveraging for your ongoing stewardship. So in that case, it might just be best to do a blanket categorization, accept the fact that your past data prior to August 2020 is just going to be formatted a certain way, and you're going to start tracking better data going forward. In some cases, you might be able to go back and fill in the blanks. Maybe you know who should be in a household together and what relationships are between people, or maybe you simply don't have that data and you're just going to do better moving forward, and that's fine. The next common obstacle that we see is the data isn't useful. So I mentioned this before, think of those gazillion custom fields that somebody on your staff 10 years ago created. They seem to kind of be filled in, and maybe people have used them different ways over the years, or maybe they haven't been using them at all. Ask yourself how important that is. Going back again to setting priorities here, ask yourself how important it is. Ask around on your staff, see if there's anyone that can speak to the importance of the data. And if you decide it's not that important, that could be some data that you keep in a spreadsheet on your internal server and don't migrate into your new database.
Christina, when I worked at my job before Neon, I remember getting there, and the database that we were using, we had what would be like tags, right? Constituent types, 90 of them. 90 of them. And the thing I actually remember doing is I ran a query against how many people actually are tagged to this. Like one of them, I'll never forget this one. It was like firemen. We were a school, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know why we were tracking some firemen, but one record in the database of 24,000 records that were there when we got it. So we, it had to be a two-step process. You had to get rid of and identify the records that had those tags, and then you got rid of the tags themselves. So this is that useful thing. It's kind of what's the output that you're trying to do? That's what I always think of when it comes to this one in particular.
Yeah, and we see it all the time working with clients. Say we're doing a data consultation, we're going to open your spreadsheets together and go through the data with you. We will walk you through it. You're going to help us understand what that data is so that we can help you import it.
And actually, let me think of another situation. Also, make sure you have the right stakeholders identifying the importance and prioritization, because a finance team member might have a different priority scale than the development shop. So make sure everybody's on the same page. I bet, and I know that there's been situations where people imported a bunch of data and then it got to finance and they're like, this is unusable. I don't know what these fields are. Why we can't actually reconcile this. How did you get into my head? This is a big problem for me. Because we lived it, Nancy. We've lived it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
awful.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay, go on. Move on. Move
yeah,
on.
it's a
Sorry.
good point about having the right people involved.
Yep.
And say maybe you have a small staff of 2 people. If neither of you know what the heck the data is, pretty good chance it's that firefighter data that is just unimportant. It happens all the time. We're going through data with the client and everybody ends up laughing a little bit because column after column, nobody has any idea what this data is or how we would possibly use it moving forward. So it can actually be eye-opening to go through the data in that type of detail.
So, and I want to be, we're coming up to a little below the halfway mark in terms of our time, but there's a really good question that I want to bring up, and then we can maybe shift into the other data types. For incomplete and therefore not useful data, thank you, Irene, for hitting both slides. How do you determine
Yeah.
which records to spend time researching and completing versus what just not to migrate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would start with your staff. Again, you have all that institutional knowledge. Somebody at your new vendor, like somebody like me, someone on your my team might be able to point you in the right direction. We don't have all that great institutional knowledge that you have about your organization. Start by asking around, talking to your teams, go through your database, like Tim said, see how many people are categorized a certain way. You can always bring that data into your new database and get rid of it later on. Do you want to spend the time moving it over is your question, right? It's really a judgment call. I wish I had a magic answer for you on that one, but it's a judgment call. You are a professional. You have done this. You can do this. You can make these executive decisions. Keep it in a spreadsheet somewhere. So if you realize you need it later on, you can attach it later on. And that's something we're going to touch on later in the presentation is how to affix data to the existing data in your database after the initial import. So I really encourage and empower you. You can do it, make those executive decisions. You and your staff can handle it. Okay, so on to inconsistent data. I like how I tried to parse these out into separate issues. We're seeing that all blends together, right? One just leads into the next one. It's kind of difficult to parse them out. But common obstacle, data is inconsistent. We saw this was a big issue for everybody here. An example that I called out is membership levels. Say those were called different things over the years. They've been renamed multiple times with staff turnover, but they're basically the same thing. The solution could be when you do your import, instead of importing a dozen different membership levels, combine them all into one level so that you can clearly see that your membership list is cleaned up, everybody's categorized the same way. That's typically a pretty easy fix when you're moving to a new database. Last common obstacle here is data is outdated. This can happen kind of without your knowledge. It's just all of a sudden you realize you have bad data in the system. Comes up a lot with direct mail campaigns. You're getting a lot of return addresses, or you're just seeing decreasing effectiveness of your direct mail campaigns over time. In this case, a good solution is doing a national change of address or an NCOA scan against your database to get the most updated USPS addresses in your database.
11% of Americans move every single year. And we're going this is why the post office isn't going to be going away, folks, because we need these types of databases to help this type of stuff. Just some call outs and Christina, flag if this is better answered in an upcoming section, but we got 2 ones. Can't wait for you to get on how to add institutionally important data to your standard import. And then is it possible to also adjust fields such as membership levels later on if you decide you have to make a change on that? So not sure how you want to handle those questions, but that's what people are thinking about right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me address adding that institutional data. If we're thinking of the data that's in your head, the stuff you're trying to extract from your executive director's brain, get it in a spreadsheet, get it somewhere in writing. If you're doing an import and getting help from us or from your new database, we can give you advice on how to best format that. We can probably give you a template to fill out, or maybe it's not something that needs to be included in your initial migration. That's actually probably my first recommendation is, do you need it in your new database right away immediately? Or can that be a project over time that you divvy up amongst staff members, or you block an hour of your executive director's time every week over the course of a month to go through and just manually log this data into the system? Think of that. Think of when it needs to be done. If it needs to be done immediately, we can probably give you a template. If it's not an immediate need, come up with a project plan for yourself.
And I think that the field adjustments later on is actually a good one that we'll handle more deeply under the appends section, because that kind of falls into that in terms of just like, that's the what after section.
Yes.
So we got it, folks. Thank you, Lisa. That's a great question. Let's keep that open to make sure that we answer it, but I think we are going to answer that.
Yes, I do have a slide on data services. Remind me to address that if I don't think of it. Okay, so we've talked about all these obstacles, these common stumbling blocks. So who does this? Are you responsible? Is your new vendor responsible? What do we do? When does it happen? That's the question we're getting at right here, is do I do this for the initial import, or do I wait until my data is already in the new system? So the answer is it might depend. It might depend on your specific scenario. I always encourage you to check with the experts, check with the staff at your new database, whoever you're working with on the migration there. Probably someone on my team, check with your consultant that you're working with. We can give you advice on how to best manage this. You could even check with your sales consultant. I don't want you to spend hours of your time manually editing your data if you don't need to. So it is always worth checking before you go on this endeavor. But I also don't want you to assume that we're going to fix something that actually you kind of need to fix on your own. An example, let's think of board members. Maybe all of your board member donations need to be allocated toward a specific board giving campaign, but your board members aren't actually identified in your data. In that case, I'm not going to have any idea that Tim is a board member and therefore his donations need to go to this board giving campaign. I simply don't have that institutional knowledge. So in that case, the responsibility would be yours to modify your data. Maybe it's the raw data, maybe it's after it's already imported. Flag your board members appropriately so those donations can be categorized appropriately. Another thing here, combining the membership levels in bulk. If this is something, this is actually getting to that last question. If you know right away, oh man, these are a mess. We don't actually have 24 membership levels. We really have 4. If you know that up front, that is something we can address in bulk prior to the import. If you can tell us what's going on, we can help you fix it. Say though, later on, you realize, oh, actually, I want to go back and combine those. There are going to be ways to do that later on with data services like we will talk about. In bulk though, I bet your new database, I know Neon can definitely handle that for you. And then last example here, data appends from TrueGivers. So TrueGivers is a partner that we work with that does those NCOA updates on your data within Neon. So running that type of scan, that type of update before you do your annual appeals, that's something you don't need to do before your initial import. Do it later on before you do your appeal. So good segue here since we're getting some questions about data appends. And what I mean by a data append is adding new data after your initial import. So just to recap so far, we've got the lay of the land here. We've talked about taking your data inventory. We've talked about data cleanup and what that might mean. So you're getting your new data in your database. What options do you have? How can you actually get data in there? So questions to generally consider. We're going to start with talking about your initial import options, then get into those ongoing data appends for adding to your initial imported data. But things to consider. You have your data inventory. What options do you have with your new database based on your data? Talk to your salesperson. Say, this is what I have. This is what I'm working with. What do you recommend for us to get our data into the system? Ask what assistance your new vendor is going to provide. Are you responsible for this on your own, Or is there a more full service option that involves your new vendor doing this for you? And also, how customized is the process going to be? Are they putting your data into templates, or is there a customized import option that is specifically catered to your data? So starting with these initial import options, first up is manual data entry. This is just like it sounds. Your staff is manually keying data in to your CRM. You could enter just about everything that way. You're not doing it in bulk. You're doing it one by one. Next option, I'm going to take this with increasing levels of assistance that we can provide you. And these are specific to Neon CRM, but I would hope you go with Neon CRM, and this would be useful information for you if you're someone that's already talking to one of our sales consultants, but I'm sure other databases have quite similar options as well. So the next step up after manual data entry, see if your new database has a built-in import tool. In Neon CRM, we have an import manager where you format your data according to specific templates, and then you can import those templates into Neon CRM. You can do this yourself. You technically don't need our assistance to do it, but we have an assisted import package where we can provide you with training and guidance, get you pointed in the right direction so you have context, and then you'd be responsible for doing the import. And we're working with templates. You can import basic account and constituent information and transactions that way. I have a good example here of Benzie Area Historical Society. They recently had a really successful self-import that they did. So shout out to Nancy. Nancy was a rock star. And this is a good example of an organization that had somebody like Nancy on staff who is very comfortable working with data, had time to dedicate to getting the import done, spent hours and hours of her own time working on the data, but teamed up with a consultant on our team to get that data in the system. They had messy, manually maintained spreadsheets, some underutilized databases, Gmail, variety of different systems. And because they had a staff person that had the time and resources and knowledge to invest, they had a very successful self-import. So moving up in order of assistance that we can provide to you, next one is going to be the standard data conversion. So this, again, is importing basic accounts and transactions using that very same import tool that is built into Neon CRM. But instead of us training you and setting you free to do the import, we are going to actually do the import for you. So we'll do the heavy lifting. We might need some help from you, but we'll do the heavy lifting of the formatting and the actual importing. And then the last option here, this is the most full service option. This is my favorite because it lets our team work in the most detail on the data, which we love to do. And this is the least work for you. You have to do very little in this case, except give us your data and help us understand your data, help us understand your priorities and how you want to use it. So for a custom data conversion, we do all of that heavy lifting. We do a customized import process, so we're not putting your data into any sort of templates. It is specifically written for your organization's data, and you can import just about anything. With some of the other import options, we're putting the data in templates, so there are limitations and parameters on what data can be included. In this case, it's kind of no holds barred. Almost everything goes with just very few exceptions here and there.
And Christina, we actually have a question that pertains to that, because this is an important part, folks, in terms of when you're reviewing the space. I've been doing this for nearly 10 years. I look at what other companies do, and a lot of times when they get to this part, they actually outsource it. They actually turn to an outside consultant because they don't have the internal resources to do this, or they don't offer this. They basically do the last version, which is they put things in a template that's a little bit more complicated than self-import, but they actually might even be using their own self-import tool and just doing it. But this is us behind the scenes doing it. And so there is a question, what file formats are preferred for data import into Neon CRM? XLS, XML, CSV?
Yeah, if you are using that self-import tool, the built-in tool has to be in CSV format. If we are doing the custom data conversion for you, ultimately we will need it in CSV format. We can get files into that format. If they're in Excel, if they're in XML, we can figure out how to get it there.
What about SQL? What about access databases?
Oh yes, access databases can be turned into CSVs.
They
That is
can.
something that we know how to do. And SQL can also be turned into CSVs. So that's something that we can help you out with. So if you're doing the standard, if you're doing that custom data conversion, we're gonna get it into CSV format. We ultimately need it. If you can help us and get it in that format for us quicker, it's gonna help the process along, but we can ultimately do it for you. If you're doing the self-import, you're gonna need to get it in CSV right away. I will say things like PDFs or photocopies of handwritten notes, we're going to ask you to transcribe those notes into a spreadsheet format for us. It's always a little funny when we see those.
And there is a pretty important question that a current organization has that I think data appends and services and kind of our support's going to answer. So I want to be respectful of the time. Maybe we can move on, but I want to make sure that that is answered because she's kind of struggling with the current ways that data was imported in, and she wants to fix it. She's not sure where to go. I think a data append section is going to help answer that.
Yeah.
Julia, just want to call out your question, make sure that I acknowledge that you've seen that.
Yeah.
And if the spreadsheet fields are not consistent from one to the next, you do that too.
Yeah, so if we know what to look for, so the naming, say the same field is on two spreadsheets, it's named different things on the different spreadsheets, but you want them combined, yes. If you point that out to us, yes, absolutely, we'll do that. We're not a mind reader. We otherwise wouldn't know that these two things might need to be combined or that the naming convention needs to be streamlined. But if you call it out to us, yes, we will take care of all that.
And somebody, Dane asked, do we need to design application forms, et cetera, and set the field names before we begin the import process so we know the correct field names? No, I don't think that's necessary.
No, you don't. With field names in Neon CRM, for one, if you have specific requests for field names, tell us. Otherwise, we're going to name it what it's named in the spreadsheet, that column header. If you want it to be called something else, let us know. When you're adding any field to a form, though, you can change the public-facing label on it. So your form never needs to be labeled what that internal field is called. You always have the ability to rename fields and to rename them publicly.
Awesome. All right, let's pop on forward.
Cool. Another client success story I wanted to point out is St. Luke's Hospital Foundation here. This is kind of the opposite of the last Benzie example that I gave. So this organization was coming to Neon CRM from Razor's Edge. So they were using Razor's Edge in a pretty sophisticated way. They had a lot of data, high volume of data, using gifts and pledges, relationships, soft credits, a lot of that detailed fundraising relational data. So we were able to migrate them successfully into Neon CRM. We see Razor's Edge data all the time. We've gotten quite good at importing standard Razor's Edge data. If it fits the standard format, we can get the import done pretty quickly. We're talking within a couple of weeks here if it's in the standard format that we're familiar with. So Katie worked with our consultant, Mary, and I know Katie was really comforted by Mary's ability to handle all of this really important, sensitive data. And she really appreciated having someone to work with, a real person that understands fundraising, that understood her needs to guide her through the migration process. Since this is a hospital foundation, we're talking about a very large volume of very important data. So having a partner to work with throughout the migration was key for them. Okay, so now we're pivoting to data appends, which we've talked about quite a bit here. So when I say data appends, again, talking about our data is in Neon CRM. We've talked about the initial import option. Now we are talking, how do we add data to what's already in there?
I think you might have double clicked. I think we got to go back one.
Oh. Back one is here. I think I'm good. Can you see?
Oh, sorry. It was we already covered the cooks in the kitchen one. There we go.
Got it. So ongoing data appends, adding that new data. First up, online forms, this is the obvious one. So in Neon CRM, if someone's filling out an online form, that's automatically entered into your database. And actually, new transactions can be affixed to or appended to the existing constituent that's already in the database. So we have a deduplication feature automatically for online forms. So the new transactions, new donations are being added to the appropriate person in the database. Next option is manual data entry. Of course, we've talked about this before. I know data entry is not everybody's favorite thing, but it's always an option. You can always manually key things in to the database. So if we're talking about a small enough data set or something that's simple enough for your staff just to quickly go key things in, that's always an option for you. Next option is doing a batch entry or a self-import. So I talked about this, the built-in self-import tool that we have. That tool doesn't go away after your initial import. You always have access to that if you want to go back and add new data. Maybe you finally are getting rid of that event ticketing platform and now you have a spreadsheet that you want to add into Neon, something that you didn't include in your initial import for some reason. You can always go back and add that later on. Or we have a batch entry tool, which is really great for, think of that stack of checks that you have. That's just your bread and butter. It's how you get a lot of your donations are in the mail. So somebody has to enter that stack of checks. There's a batch entry function that makes it easier to enter a large volume of checks at once. So you're not keying them in one by one. It's going to facilitate that a little bit faster for you.
And it should be noted that these are all things that databases should have that are typically self-service, right? So,
Yes.
so asking, what are my self-service data options, as well as how does the data get deduplicated with existing data as well is important, because if you're throwing new people against a form, or if you're typing something in the back end, and if it doesn't allow you to match it up with existing data, that's a problem. We've covered that, though, it should be noted.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can duplicates, some duplicates are going to happen no matter what, because you're relying on how people prefer to be named or manually type things on a form. There's human error when we're talking about humans entering the data in. So you might end up with some duplicates no matter what you do. But if you stay on top of it regularly and you have a system with the right pieces in place, it shouldn't turn into this overwhelming problem where you're muddying through thousands of them.
And I wanted to pause there on that because then the next two are a little bit more sophisticated in terms of their data management.
Yep, you got it. So thinking of those more sophisticated options, we talked about self-serve options. Here, we're talking about options, ways that we can help you. If you don't have time to enter this data on your own, or if it's something more complex, at most systems or most databases, your self-service tools are probably going to facilitate data entry for basic data. But if we're talking about something more complex, like relationships between many accounts, probably something, at least in Neon CRM's case, that we're going to enter for you instead of you being able to use that batch tool. We can do what's called a data service, and this is how we can import data, move data around for you in any type of way. This is a customized option, so you tell us what you're looking for. We will figure out a way to get it done, because we're not talking about templates here. We're not talking about an import tool. We are custom writing scripts to do something to your data, to bring in data, to move it around. So this could be importing additional spreadsheets for you because you don't have the staff time or capacity to deal with it. You don't want to think about it. This could also be the case with merging membership levels that we talked about before. So you have those dozen membership levels. You decided or didn't think to merge them in your initial import, but you've realized 6 months down the road, oh, actually, we'd like those merged together. You've made some decisions, or you have a new plan that you're working on in your organization. We can merge those in bulk for you through what's called a data service. We can pretty easily move that data around for you.
That helps answer Lisa's question from before.
Perfect. And then here, another of the more sophisticated options. Tim, do you want to take this one?
I'd actually love to field this
Okay.
one. So this is the fun part of my job, where Christina's handling a lot of the internal capabilities and getting people comfortable. There's a lot of stuff in the Neon One ecosystem that we've curated, that we don't do everything, right? Like Neon One does a lot of different stuff. If you're not aware, we have peer-to-peer fundraising, even client case management, that sensitive kind of data about like students or case management for HIPAA compliance. We do that, and we're actually building custom integrations to make sure the right data gets into Neon CRM for organizations. But then there's stuff that's outside of our purview that a lot of database ecosystems, what they do is they say either, well, we don't really, you're on your own and you can figure it out on your own, and then they hand you something called an API and go, good luck. Or they say, here's a bunch of stuff, but it's just so overwhelming, you're not sure what to do. So what we do is we take the middle approach, which is we curate it. And so by curating the integrations, these are things that have been tested. They've been reviewed by a staff member, me first, and then a quality assurance specialist at Neon One. So the examples that are really interesting when they celebrate around data maintenance are True Givers. That's a big one that we love talking about. It actually runs those NCOA updates as well as reviews the Social Security Index on a nightly basis, and will actually update nightly if somebody's moved, the new address, and flagging if somebody's passed away, for instance. UJoin is one of our database options that does things that like advocacy, like I need to hit my legislator and I need to flag what action that my community has actually taken. That actually can be appended right into the CRM. Zapier is a really interesting one that connects with thousands of different applications. So there's even some people who are like, I want to use some random donation thing, and there's actually a potential chance we can work with it through Zapier. And what we've also done is taken an extra step there and curated a specialist who can implement Zapier, for instance, if you are having trouble understanding it. They're called Sidekick Solutions. They can actually build all the Zaps for you because they know Neon, and they're actually Zapier certified too. So we certify consultants in our ecosystem alongside integrations. And then also some wealth screening options. And wink, wink, hint, hint, there's actually going to be some exciting announcements relating to that in the coming months for CRM users in terms of really taking the integrations on that space to the next level. So check neon1.com. We have a partners directory, and we actually flag all of our certified integrations on that website, including documentation, and we ensure that every single integration needs to tell you how it works and what fields it affects to. So we do this on your behalf. So that's one other element of the Neon One ecosystem beyond everything that we just talked about that we do in-house. So I think we're coming up to, oh yeah, some further resources. Just want to kind of call these out, and we have a few minutes for questions. We've actually been answering a bunch of great questions along the way. But one, we're going to talk about True Givers a lot today because this is one where we're getting into direct mail is still driving a lot of the donations that are happening. People who ignore direct mail are doing it at their peril in many ways. A multi-channel approach like what Neon can help facilitate for tracking the physical letters and the emails actually typically has a 34% higher response rate. So you need to be mailing to the right people though. And somebody rightfully pointed out that a lot more people are moving because of the pandemic. They're like, I don't like sitting here anymore. I want to be in a different place and sit there. So that's happening. I'd be interested to see what the rates are compared to previous years. But again, historical average is 11% of people move. True Givers can help automate that. Neon One Academy. Christina, do you want to talk a little bit about Neon One Academy?
Yeah, happy to. So the Neon One Academy is available to all Neon CRM clients. And what we have there, it's our self-guided training and certification platform. So there are curated learning paths and courses that you can take. So compilation of videos and some written guides, but also quizzes and more interactive elements for you to educate yourself on different Neon CRM areas. Maybe it's a dedicated course about setting up an event. Maybe it's a learning path curated for a communications staff member. You can enroll in these courses, in these learning paths, to spend some independent time doing research, learning the system on your own. The resources are always there, always available to you, and very curated for specific things that you're looking to learn.
This is absolutely free. And actually, technically, Christina, you don't even need to be a Neon CRM or Neon One client. We've actually made this resource available for everybody to leverage.
There we go.
But look at that. You know, so one of the things I always like to cite on that one is you're applying to a new job. You notice on the job application, they say Neon CRM is our database. Go ahead, get certified. You can go into that job interview and say, I'm certified. Didn't cost you a dime. Other places are charging an arm and a leg for this, by the way. The one that we link to right here is specifically about data automation entry into the CRM. So take a look at that. If you're a CRM user, it actually uses the same login as Neon as well. And then finally, we wrote an article for N10 about data stewardship. So this is just general hygiene and ways to approach. So check that out. So we do have time for a few questions. Final slide's just kind of a thank you slide. So, you know, let's make good happen. Folks, what can we answer for you? We got an absolute dynamo expert here. You know, one of the questions, Christina, that we always get is how much and how long? How much and how long?
Yep, very good question. So it varies depending on what type of import option you're going with, right? So that's why we've done our inventory. We've figured out what do we need to do to get to our data in. We're talking to our sales consultant to figure out, can we reasonably do a self-import? Do we need a custom data conversion? The pricing is going to differ depending on what you're talking about. With the assisted self-import or the standard data conversion, for instance, those are flat fees. If your data qualifies, flat fee for you to get in the door and use those services. Standard data conversion, we're talking $1,500. Assisted self-import, we're talking $600. When we're looking at a custom data conversion, that is the full service option. We're going to provide you with a custom quote for that because we're going to look at your data and specifically give you an estimate for cost based on what we see. And question, of course, is how do you come to that cost? What actually goes into that? And it's going to be based on a couple of different factors. So your data structure, do you have 2 spreadsheets or do you have 10 spreadsheets? Do you have hundreds of columns in your data? How complex is it? Are we talking basic constituents or do you have soft credits and very high level relational data? Volume actually doesn't tend to have a big impact on cost. If you have 2,000 records or 10,000, not a huge impact on cost if it's all formatted in roughly the same way. So volume actually has less of an impact than some people might think. The structure and the complexity is more what we look at to give you a good estimate.
Awesome. So we had a question about another part of our ecosystem that we're calling right now Arts People. And in terms of how does it compare in terms of the CRM and you know, what's the long-term support in terms of things of that nature. And I'll take that one. So what we want to do is create a larger ecosystem. We love Arts People and the data structure is actually very similar in terms of that. So if that's meeting your needs from a CRM standpoint, great. Neon's more robust when it comes to individual donor management. What we love about Arts People is the ticketing. So we're going to have some exciting things, and we made reference to this at the Generosity Exchange, by the way, our recent user conference. That we're going to be rolling out some announcements relating to events and things of that nature in terms of our ecosystem. So stay tuned for that one. Absolutely, we want to support all the organizations who are using our products. Let's see.
The last question had asked about timeline, and I didn't address timeline. I'd like to do that quickly if I can. For timeline, again, it's going to vary based on which import option you choose. I will say that with the assisted self-import, the option where you're doing the heavy lifting, this is where we see timelines get pretty hairy because it's up to you to get the data in. So most clients might think, oh, I'm going to get this done in a couple of weeks. It actually ends up taking probably 8 weeks for most clients to actually import their data. Whereas if you have us do this through the standard data conversion, that's the templated option, we're going to get it in probably 3 weeks for you, maybe 4 weeks max. If you're doing the custom data conversion, we're going to get it in 6 weeks, definitely less than the 8 weeks that you're probably going to spend doing it on your own. The assisted import, we just see a lot of clients struggle finding the time to import the data themselves. So when you're thinking of timeline, factor in how much time do you have to work on this and weigh
Yep.
that against the cost, because that really, we see that slow a lot of clients down if they can't find the time to do it.
Awesome. And I got one final question that Melanie's asked before we let folks go. I think it's a fun one, but just as a reminder, this has been recorded, and also there is a downloadable in the handouts portion of GoToWebinar where you can get the deck, and that's where you can click on some of those links. So how would I handle unsubscribes without taking out the email address? I think this is an interesting question that I actually have a lot more questions personally in order to handle it. Christina, before I kick it over to you, I will say that on the integration side, for instance, if somebody's using Constant Contact, our integration actually allows you to flag the unsubscribe logic there to flag it in both sides. That's what we do. But internally, in terms of Neon CRM, how would you answer that question in terms of our own email marketing tools that we have?
Sure. So it's, if I'm interpreting this right, it sounds like you have somebody's email address in a spreadsheet, but you want to import the email address to Neon, but you want to mark them as unsubscribed so they don't get your emails. It's as simple as that. You mark
Yes.
them as unsubscribed. It's a standard field to mark somebody as unsubscribed so they don't get the emails, but the email is still in there for your record keeping.
Yeah, there's a few high level flags on the account record, such as they've passed away, they do not want communications, or down to the individual, because there's 3 standard email fields in Neon. Each email could be, let's say, email 1 and 2, subscribe, email 3, work email, unsubscribe. You can do that. You can do that. I know we're a tiny bit over. Any final questions, folks, for Christina? Well, I am thrilled that we seem to have answered everybody's data questions that they'll ever have. But seriously, folks, I want to thank all of you for spending the time here today to learn about how to approach data migrations. Christina, I want to thank you so much for an excellent, amazing, informative presentation. And folks, reach out to us, sales@neon1.com or neoncrm.com works too, or talk with your account rep. If you are a Neon client and you're struggling, then great. Then, talk to us. Let's reach out. Talk to your client success manager. They'll be able to help you out, because remember, we got all those wonderful data services, appends, internal functionality to support you long-term. Data maintenance and data stewardship is a long-term initiative. That's what we're here to help with. So, very cool. All right. Thank you. Any final words, Christina?
No, thank you, Tim. I'm so glad we did a webinar all about data. It's very exciting to me, and I hope this was useful for people. I know talking about data might not seem exciting, but I hope we brought a little bit of excitement to it for you.
You know what? I just was looking at the landscape and going, how has no one done a webinar on this type of thing? So that's why we did it. And so next month, folks, we're already planning our webinars. Hashtag data nerds. That's right, Nancy. Hashtag data nerds.
Go, Nancy.
Feel free to tweet me, Midwest TGS, if you want to hashtag that. Our webinar is coming up for September, by the way. We're going to be doing a product centered one around just kind of getting your appeals planning ready for Giving Tuesday. So we're pretty excited about that one. We'll be putting out an email soon, and then we're also planning a actual Giving Tuesday retrospective with Giving Tuesday themselves. So we're getting you ready for your Giving Tuesday planning, and then we got some really awesome stuff planned for the rest of the year. We're heading into a surge, folks. We're gonna have a surge of fundraising, and it's because we have good data. It's because of the work that you're gonna be doing on your data to do that. All right, have a great day, folks. We'll be in touch. Data nerds unite.
Bye, everyone.
You should do webinars for new Neon CRM customers who are just learning all our new newsletters and Neon One Academy. And Julia, yes, actually, that's the intent of actually putting the Neon One Academy courses in our webinars now.
Yep.
We're going to be explicitly tying that content moving forward. So good idea. I slightly beat you to it in terms of that, but we thought that was a good idea too. So, and we got some really cool things coming when it comes to overall client support that we're going to be rolling out. So be on the lookout. Oh, data. All right. Have a great day, folks.